this thing is the best job I've ever had. Like I love editing more than any other job that I've had. And yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I am your host, Paulina, and today I am here with Dee Scott. Dee's academic background is in biology, law, and human geography, including a JD from Lewis and Clark Law School and a PhD from Rutgers. They have been an NGO policy advisor, practiced international environmental law, and conducted research on the governance of new and emerging sciences and technologies. As an editor, Dee helps writers identify the purpose of their piece and then work with them to explore how its structure and language can best align with this purpose. In addition to sharing their journey out of academia and into editing, I invited Dee to join me on the podcast to talk about their experience with chronic illness. This question of how chronic illness and disabilities affects freelancers is one that I get a lot as people are thinking about how they can make their personal life situations work in the freelance space, especially if they're in the United States and they have concerns over health insurance and healthcare access. And so I thought it would help to have somebody on the podcast who's actually experienced this and can give the real story and real advice. So welcome to the podcast, Dee, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
So let's start with your story of being in academia and what led you to leave.
Yeah, so I defended my PhD in 2015 and moved from Rutgers, New Jersey, to Edinburgh, Scotland, to the University of Edinburgh for a
Nice.
postdoc in the Science and Technology Studies department there. And I was very excited. I was a bit nervous. I was still like reeling from the whole PhD thing, which had been a real journey, and hit the ground running. It was so exciting to be there and exciting to be in this beautiful city and this country that, like, I mean, my last name is Scott because one part of my ancestry is from Scotland. Yeah, I was just really sort of soaking it in. And then I got sick that November with a virus, and then I didn't get better. And then I got worse. And then the original problem sort of went away, but I had a whole new set of problems. And so that is like a very common path for post-viral chronic fatigue. I was living in the UK, and so the diagnosis that I got was ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and that's very common there. Here in the States, it's sort of chronic fatigue syndrome. And of course, like when people talk about long COVID and they describe long COVID, like that is essentially from the in like my understanding of it and my conversations with other people, where they're going through a post-viral fatigue experience. And so my initial postdoc had been a contract for, I think it was 2.5 years. And there were several things that were really great about it. One was that ended up getting extended for 2 more years. So I ended up having this contract for 4.5 years. I had an amazing PI, so understanding, and it was a very large, very loose grant. So what that meant was that like, 2 or 3 months into this postdoc, I get sick. I'm like, this is strange. Like, what's going on here? I sort of take the amount of time that I think being sick should take, and then I try to get back to work, and then that doesn't work, and then I try to get back to work, and then that doesn't work. Right. And my vision for what I was going to be able to do on this postdoc initially needed to change, but I had difficulty understanding how to do that. Like I was still trying to do event ethnographies and going to negotiations of the Biological Weapons Commission convention, and like that was not something within my energy envelope. And so I was having major crashes. And over time, I would say after maybe probably 2 years, I started to feel like, okay, I'm not going to be able to get on the tenure track. I don't want to get to go from this onto a tenure track and start just like running full out. Like this is not something I can do. And I didn't really know where that led me. And I kept hoping that I would recover. And I did have times when I got better and times when I was couch-bound for several months. And so I sort of started to let go of the vision of what the rest of my life was going to look like. And that was hard and sort of came in fits and starts, but it also sort of opened up other possibilities. So there I was. I had a supportive PI. I had a loose grant. I was like, okay, well, if I'm not doing things in order to put together an academic CV that is going to get me a tenure track job, what do I want to do? And so with some other people, I started like the social dimensions of outer space Scottish network. And we got a little grant. We like got a bunch of like space scientists and social scientists and humanities people, and we like created a book, Scotland in Space. It's a fun time. There's some like unique three really fun science fiction stories and then reflections on that from different perspectives. So like, that kind of thing. Like it was such a joy to do that, and it was so meaningless in the face of academia. And I started doing more like theoretical work, more like thinking about responsible research and innovation instead of going out and doing the like interviewing and the ethnography that I'd done before. So those shifts sort of were part of how I tried to make the most out of what I was able to do. At times, by the end, I had like half an hour of work in me a day. So my contract ended, and I had offers to stay in Scotland and work for other professors on a postdoc. I could have gone to other postdocs. And I didn't want to do that. I don't think they understood how what my working capacity actually looked like. And Scotland is a wonderful place in many, many ways. It's maybe not the best place to have chronic fatigue. Like it was cold and damp pretty much all the time. And I knew, so my plan was to take some time off completely and to not try to work. And then if necessary, my vision was to work as a freelance editor. And that informed how I left academia in some ways. So I needed to go back to the States because I'd only been there for 4.5 years, and you can apply for permanent right to remain after 5 years in the UK. And I looked at the states where I had people and where the climate seemed to fit with what I hoped would be helpful. And I also looked which states have expanded Medicaid, because most do, but some really don't. And the kinds of support and the kinds of programs that states have for people to get on Medicaid, but also what happens once you're off Medicaid really varies. And so I ended up choosing to come to New Mexico, try to be like the most different climate that I could think of from Scotland. And in fact, I was right. It is the most different climate.
What year was this when you came back to
So,
this?
yeah, so this was March of 2020.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so that was another thing. Like I flew from from Edinburgh to Albuquerque, I landed and the WHO had declared a global pandemic.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I,
That's wild.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was wild. Yeah, and sort of things because of that, things were not as I had sort of planned, like envisioned them being. But it worked out. It worked out great. Like New Mexico has been an amazing place to live and to heal and to run a business.
So how did you said that you left the postdoc knowing that you wanted to go into editing? How did you figure out that that was even a thing you could do?
That was sort of what I always loved the most in all the jobs I ever had was working with documents of colleagues and giving them feedback. I did not at the time, I think, have a good sense of what it is that a freelance editor does, quite frankly. I had not worked with freelance editor, so I knew I had a lot of learning. I did not realize how much learning I had to do. I knew I had some learning to do, didn't realize how much. But like in terms of the skill set that I already had in terms of critical reading, deep reading, concentration, sense of language, and structure. But also, I knew that with the chronic fatigue, that I wanted to work for myself and I wanted to, like, I couldn't get a part-time job because I couldn't reliably hold down a certain number of hours a week. And so when I started with my former PI working on her book and other former colleagues. And I also started with like getting an education about what academic developmental editing can look like, how that's different from peer review, how doing line editing, what that can look like, sort of how to get like a feel of where the boundaries are. Yeah, so it was a big, it was great. It was a lot of like learning that really resonated with the skills that I already had, but sort of helped me see how to better deploy them or sort of hone them in the specific realm of like the kind of work that we do as academic freelance editors.
Yeah. So it sounds like free I think a lot of people are nervous to go into freelancing because of the lack of health insurance. But it sounds like for you that was actually not the lack of health insurance was a draw, but the freelancing was actually a draw because of the scheduling flexibility that it gives
Yeah,
you as opposed to like a traditional job.
you know, because it's one thing to be in the UK where there's massive amounts of sick leave and PTO and people understand boundaries, right? And it's another thing to be in the States and to have like so little PTO, if any, with a part-time job. And you know, I think what I'm going to be describing today is like my path, and there are things about my situation that made that necessary and made it possible. And that's not going to be the same calculus for everybody by any means. But for me, I had known for long enough, you know, like pretty much 2.5 years, I was like, okay, I don't have a tenure track job on the other side of this. And so I had started saving and I chose a state that had expanded Medicaid. And I mean, just to say New Mexico, the like Medicaid and statewide marketplace is such a great program. And I have been treated with such dignity within it. It's been like the best experience of like engaging with bureaucracy in my life, which is amazing, which is great because this is a very tender and scary thing. And so I ended up being on Medicaid for I think about 2 years. I mean, sort of everybody who was on Medicaid could stay on Medicaid during the COVID sort of lockdown time. And sort of it worked out well for building my business throughout my my priority was always my health, not like building a robust business, because I couldn't build a robust business without a more robust body. And for that, I sort of had to develop a completely different relationship to work. And that has been possible. And I think that has been possible in part thanks to freelance editing. I have gone from being somebody who worked at NGOs and worked in academia and was always like, yeah, limits what limits. Like, yeah, I mean, sure, I can probably write that paper in 2 weeks. Like, I've never done it before. It's always taken 2 years before, but like, technically, there's no reason that this couldn't take 2 weeks, right? Yeah, it could probably take 2 weeks. And to go from that to like over time getting a sense of how many hours any given project is going to take. And then depending on where I'm at with flair or doing well, like how many days will it take me to do that many hours of work? And to be really honest with myself about that has been like a major sea change in how I relate to work. That's been really fantastic. Yeah, and so the like being able to like get a sense of that, to be making enough to live, and to just being okay with that being the case, to try not to freak out too much about like will I ever be able to retire, like or like what, yeah, to just be like, okay, this is great. I want to celebrate that I am managing to do this. And after 2 years, when I got off Medicaid, New Mexico, the Be Well Marketplace program is really nicely gradated. So it's stressful because at the beginning of every year, I have to say how much money I'm going to make, which like, but like initially, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to make this much money. And they're like, great, you will not have to pay a premium, a monthly premium. Like, like it wasn't as robust as Medicaid, like in terms of, I mean, I had to pay some copays and stuff, but like it's been really, as my business has grown since then and I've made more money every year, it's been sort of like an easing into, okay, and now I'm like having to set aside monthly premium payments. Like it's just kind of worked. They've been able to grow together. And I know that not every state has that, and not everybody has the flexibility to choose what state to live in part because of that. But if you do have that flexibility, I recommend like looking at what the options are. And and I think not assuming the worst. There are a lot of really harrowing worst case scenario stories around health insurance in the US out there, especially for people with chronic illnesses and disabilities, especially for freelancers. And in my case, I look back and I was so stressed out about getting kicked out of Medicaid. And then it was not worth having done all that worrying and stress because it worked out beautifully. Like, yeah. So like get the information that's very specific to your state and your situation.
Yeah, I love how you've explained that part of your journey from like where you came back to the US and kind of took it one step at a time. And I want to break down what some of these terms mean for folks who are not familiar with Medicaid and the healthcare system here, which is big picture a train wreck, but also
Yeah.
it sounds like you've been able to make it work. So of course, so essentially what I'm hearing you say is you chose New Mexico because that state has more support for people on lower incomes without the
Yeah.
traditional jobs. So
Yeah.
Medicaid, of course, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is a federally funded program that's administered by the states. And we think of it as, if your income is below a certain threshold, then you qualify for Medicaid. Like here in Maine, it's called Maine Care. Everybody thinks it's Maine Care, but it's really Medicaid. I'm sure it has,
Hmm.
its own name there.
Be well, New
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yeah. So it sounds like I think what I really want to highlight in that part of the story is that you chose your health over the career, right? Which is huge. I mean, so many
Yeah.
people who don't have chronic illness are beating themselves into the ground to pursue this tenure track job or to get tenure or whatever. And they're sacrificing their health
Hmm.
just because like we're quote unquote supposed to do this, right? This is the way
Yeah.
academia is. So I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing to start with is just to hear you say I'm going to choose my health and figure out a way that I can take care of myself even if it's not
Hmm.
ideal financially right now, and just kind of trust that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was not an easy path to get to that point because it was really letting go of a lot of the ways that I've been socialized to understand who I was in the world and the value that I have in the world and with myself. But it is something that I'm really grateful for that I was forced into this series of realizations and learning about myself. And I have to keep learning some of those things. When I have an upswing, I'll often find myself sliding back into a relationship with work that looks more like that academic, that like legal side. But, I mean, I want to say that like while I did sort of get pushed, feel like my situation, I got pushed out of academia and into this thing. This thing is the best job I've ever had. Like I love editing more than any other job that I've had. And yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
I agree. It is. I don't think I could ever work for somebody else ever again after working for myself and
Yeah.
just having the freedom to decide what I want to do every day. So you said the pandemic ended, quote unquote, ended,
Nope, nope,
right?
hasn't
The
ended.
peak,
Hasn't ended. Still
yeah,
masking out here.
the peak
Yep.
of it, or we came out of
Hmm.
lockdown and the
Yes.
policies changed again.
Yes.
And so then the question was it also that you were making more money at that point that you then left the Medicaid program and you went on to into the marketplace, which is
Yeah.
the essentially the internet for anybody who's never been on the marketplace. You have to choose amongst these different plans for
Hmm.
your state and you can choose the level of care, I guess, right? They
Yeah.
have like the more budget plans that are cheaper but offer less care, or you have a higher deductible that you pay versus the
Hmm.
premium plans where you pay more every month, but the cost, per visit comes down. Is that what was happening?
Yes, although, so here in New Mexico, there are health insurance brokers who we can use for free. And so I have a health insurance broker, and a lot of people don't know that they're there as a resource. But if your state does have them as a resource, absolutely use them. Because I, like, the first time I got on, I was like, well, there's hundreds of, I don't like, what is going on here? And Ryan, my health insurance broker, was like, there's one. Here's the best option. Let me explain it to you. And I was like, oh. Then this last year, Ryan was like, there's four options. You do have some choices now. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm making more money. Amazing. I've got options and I'm gonna have to pay more. But yeah, so that was a real resource for me. And again, New Mexico, the federal government is really changing, has really changed a lot about Medicaid. But even though it is a federal program, it really depends what state you're in. And so New Mexico has committed in this past year, like all of the subsidies that got taken away, New Mexico has stepped up and covered all of that. So there's like $500 a month that the federal government used to cover, and now New Mexico is covering, and that I was like freaking out some about whether or not I was going to have to cover myself. And we'll see going forward what this is going to look like. We'll see how long states like New Mexico can continue to provide the support that they are. But I think I think more than 35% of New Mexico is on Medicaid, actually. Like it's yeah, and we've got a state legislature that's committed to providing support. So we'll see what this looks like going forward. But it's been when I was in Scotland under the NHS and the like healthcare and everything, I was really scared of the health insurance aspect and felt like it wasn't an option to be a freelance. And like I said, in my case, it's absolutely been possible
Yeah.
and positive.
Yeah, that's definitely what I hear from people. I mean, I've gotten emails from people who say, "Oh, I'd love to be an editor, but I have, the chronic illness or some whatever, and I need care and I can't leave my job because I need the insurance." And so I
Yeah.
love that what I'm hearing from you is if you are miserable in your regular job, you don't have to force
Yeah.
yourself to stay. There are ways out of it.
Right. Like if I had chosen to get a job for the benefits, I would have kept running myself down into the absolute ground to the point where I couldn't do anything. Like that's that's sort of how the pattern of like the 4.5 years, I was gradually getting worse over time. And so being able to set up a working life that accounted for my capacity at any given time has been really helpful for me in managing my condition. And so that I'd say, it's absolutely worth exploring and looking into. And there are then, that's not to say that choosing to work as a freelancer automatically means that you're have a better boss. We're often not good bosses of ourselves. That's something that I've had to sort of like relearn for myself how to, yeah, prioritize myself and my health and still be working with clients and et cetera. And at the beginning, the way that that looked like was I did take on a few books, like larger projects. And in retrospect, I didn't ask for enough time on those. And sort of because of that, then I kind of like shifted way more into articles, which were sort of like a more contained, it's like a few weeks is how I was doing it at the time. And that worked out really well. I was often sort of getting requests, can you work on this now? And then I would know, well, can I work on this now? Am I doing well enough to work on this now? If I'm doing well enough-ish, how long do I need to ask for? And that was like a real learning process, just getting information about, yeah, how to best pace my schedule. And now over time, I've now been doing this since January of 2021. So, I'm in my sixth year. And that face was me like being like trying to do some math there. But it is. I've been doing this for over 5 years. And most small businesses fail before 5 years, right? And there is really something to it in that like I am now booked to the end of the year. And one of the things about that is that when I book long term, I book generously for my time. I do not assume a best case scenario for my health. I never assume that I'll be better than I am at the moment when I am booking things. And I try to leave in space for flare-ups. And then, like, I've had a good spring. And so as things come up and they're like, oh, can you work on this now? Can you work on this now? There's space in the schedule that I've made that because I am doing well, I've got this larger project that I've been working on, but I've got space to put things in within that. And so I can build up my schedule more if I'm feeling up for it, or I can leave it as it is. And, when I am making commitments of how long I'm saying how long I'll need to work on something, I think a lot of people at the beginning feel like, oh, they're expecting a really fast turnaround, or I have to have a really fast turnaround, or I won't be competitive. And I think there are times when there is an actual time pressure because of a publisher, etc. But we should not assume that. Like, don't assume anything about these prospective clients. Don't assume that they have the same relationship to money that you do, that like they budget in the same way, that they have that their time is, you know, don't make those assumptions. Don't be projecting what you think they want and need. Think about what you need in order to do a good job and in order to account for sort of as you understand your body mind, like the possibilities of needing time, needing a longer amount of time. And yeah, the more I have asked for flexibility, the more it's been there on the part of clients.
I'm going to come back to your scheduling approach because I know that's something a lot of people ask about, but I just want to underscore what you just said about how we need to stop assuming that other people think about money the same way we do, or other people think about scheduling the same way we do, because across the board, when I'm working with people. I mean, I don't think this is unique to academics by any means. People in general, I think, have this problem when they're going into business and especially becoming coaches and service providers
Mm,
is, and I did it too, because I grew up as a poor kid and I was like always
hmm
pinching pennies. And I had
hmm
that kind of money trauma left over from my childhood. And I just had a conversation with one of my clients this morning about how she was assuming that she would present her coaching package to this potential client in a certain way because that's how she would want to receive it. And I have to say
Yeah.
to everybody, it is none of our business what is in somebody's bank account. It is none of our
Yeah.
business how they, decide whether or not they want to work with us.
hmm
And as you said, we have to have our own boundaries.
Yeah.
One of my husband's favorite quotes that he uses when he talks about other people he works with is your lack of preparation doesn't on or the lack of preparation on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. And
Yeah.
so, right?
Yeah.
Like just because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
waited till 2 days before your dissertation is due to hire an editor doesn't mean
hmm
that I have to be the one to try to rush through it or something.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I do again over time I've been able to build in some flexibility. Like I do give a discount if somebody is paying out of pocket and they don't have institutional backing, but it's a 5% discount. I mean, it's not unmeaningful. It is meaningful, but it is not like a dramatic slashing of my rates. But I also will ask a client like, okay, depending on what your budget looks like, if it needs to be less, how can we restrict my scope? Right. So it's not, I will do the same amount for you for less. It's like, let's try to get this so that it's like exactly the most what you need. And I'm not spending time doing stuff that you don't need as much, that you don't have the bandwidth to pay for. And, I did not live my life thinking that I was going to have to worry about money because I knew that I could live on not very much money. And also, I wasn't paying for my schooling all along the way. And so I was like, yeah, why not do this? Which has put me in a situation now. But like, it's been really different for me to have to think about money and to worry about money and to try to understand how to make enough money. And over time, my rates have gone up. And I feel I'm still shocked at how much of a difference it's made for me, having higher rates, not just like, oh, more money's coming in. I don't have to work as many hours if I'm not able to, but also like weirdly, just feel better about doing the work. I'm like, yes, I am doing highly skilled work and I'm getting paid for it. It's like I think, yeah, I'm weirdly finding some value in that.
No, I love that too, because I see so many editors who have PhDs or other, terminal degrees, and they're charging 2 cents a word to private clients. And I just
Yeah.
think it breaks my heart because that they don't have to do that, or they're struggling financially, and it's like you need to charge more. That's the answer, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a thing that I'm like, and yeah, I mean, if you're in the like learning about becoming an editor space, probably you hear this a lot, but there is a reason for it. It's that we're all like, raise your rates, everybody, raise your rates. Like we are all doing work with value, and like, and those of us with chronic illnesses can't do as many hours. Like we don't have that option for how to make more money. Like our rates have to be at a livable stage for the reality of our lives and what we're able to do with work. So that's been a journey for me and a really positive one.
Yeah. Well, I want to recap a couple of things if we can, just to make sure folks have the resources or know where to go to find the resources on some of this stuff. So you had mentioned researching different states. So if we have somebody out
Hmm.
there who's listening and they hate their job, or maybe they love their job, but they just can't stay in it because of the scheduling and they need the flexibility that a freelance career offers them, what is a good place for them to start
Hmm.
researching different state situations in terms of health insurance? Would you say to go to like each state's health department web or, policy, political
Yeah.
science professor here? You'd think I could get the words out. Um,
Yeah.
like each state level, is there some other resource that you know of that's helpful, or what would you suggest?
It is what I did. It was sort of like I could go to Wisconsin and I was like, oh, wow, Wisconsin doesn't have expanded Medicaid. Wisconsin's got nothing. Yeah, so I knew I there were a handful of states that were possibilities for me, and I explored, what that might look like on the health insurance end of things. And, it also happens that it varies very much by state also how much it costs to run a business and what that looks like. And, after a few years, once I started doing more work around conscious and inclusive language and developing an online course around that, I wanted to be an LLC, and that is something that has been very easy to do and very affordable in New Mexico, which that's not the case in, for example, California. So those are places to look into. And, I mean, I think it's also, I chose, like, you want to think about it as like, where are there where is their community and where is their support in various ways? And there's that sort of bureaucratic support that's been so valuable for me in New Mexico. And there's also the support that I've gotten from the community of people and the people that I've gotten to know. And I wanted to also name as a resource for people who are interested, like just to flag, so many freelance editors are doing this work because of chronic illnesses, disabilities. So many people are neurodivergent, and like in terms of thinking about support for oneself, like I had no idea that by becoming a freelance editor, I would eventually be building this like amazing communities of colleagues and communities of colleagues who also have chronic illness or disability and who come together to support each other. So if you have questions around how much or whether to disclose to clients about your various conditions. If you have questions, if you're wondering to yourself, like, how do I balance this making a schedule that works for them and for me? Like these are things that so many of us have been through and we've all found our own path, but it's been really helpful to to have conversation with each other. So the Northwest Editors Guild is based in the American Northwest. You do not have to be a member of the Northwest Editors Guild to attend the monthly Editors with Chronic Illnesses, Disabilities, and Neurodivergence Zoom call. You can go on the Northwest Editors Guild website and go to the calendar, and you can sign up and just show up. And we are a friendly group of folks. We sort of have a different focus. Some months we have a specific focus. Sometimes some months we show up and we're like, how's everybody body minds? What do we want to chat about? The last time we chatted about, I asked them if they had like specific things that they would want, like the listeners of this podcast to know about. There's also the LGBTQ plus Editors Association. If you're within that alphabet, come on by. We have Zoom calls and stuff. Primarily it's sort of like a Slack channel. And within that, we've got our chronic illnesses, disabilities, and neurodivergences like specific channel. We have monthly calls. I'm on I'm on a Discord of editors with long COVID and ME CFS. Like there are so many different spaces where people are being so generous with their time and experiences and support. And I have drawn on that in so many different ways in terms of like figuring out how to set up my business, troubleshooting as things go along. And also, like, it has happened once now, I think, that I had a project that had a really tight deadline and I had a really bad flare up. And I was able to bring in another editor to help me with that work. Like that is something that I don't know that I would have thought of as a possibility if I hadn't been in conversation with these other editors. So there's lots of different kinds of support that you can start to reach out and build around yourself.
And I'll get the links for both of those groups and put them in the show notes so folks can find that easily. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I really appreciate you have a sense of calm around all of this. And I'm sure that as you've said a few times, it took time and work to get
Yeah.
there, shifting your identity in terms of like being, the burned out academic to being somebody
Hmm.
who's takes care of yourself and
Hmm.
prioritizes yourself and your business. But where you are now, I think you really give a sense of calm about it's okay. This is possible. What I hear
Hmm.
from you is like trust the process, trust your own abilities, trust that you have value. And I think that's going to be really inspiring for a lot of people who've been
Yeah.
struggling with this decision. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so happy to talk about my experiences and to just let people know about the different kinds of resources that are there, and I think the sense of agency that I have in my own life. And this is something that I've heard on your podcast. I mean, I think it comes up, right? Like it's great. It's life-changing. And also, I know freelance editors who don't feel that they have very much agency in their lives, who are like, oh, I was going to come, but just had a thing, so I'm going to have to work on this weekend. So I guess I won't see you at that editing get together, like because yeah, they're just completely continuing a process of sort of letting other people determine their own schedule and the shape of their lives to some degree. And so, yeah, I think it's important for people to know that it doesn't have to look like that. You can be a freelancer. You can be a freelancer who's not really on the internet, not really on the internet over here, because I find that really exhausting. Scrolling screens, I don't do well with them. And so I've found spaces like Discord channels, like Slack channels, that feel more like communities where we're having discussions and where I'm getting connected. And, like that's worked perfectly well for me. So if there are things about running your own business that feel like, oh, yeah, but I don't want to be on Instagram, or yeah, but like I don't think I have a podcast in me. I don't think I can host a podcast like Paulina does. Like, well, that's great. Paulina's doing it. She's doing it great. We don't all have to. Like the you can shape the business to fit what you want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anybody would like to work with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, come on by. So I've got a website, dscottedits.com. That is the great place to go fill out the sheet on the contact page. And that is pretty much my most where I'm present. I am nominally on LinkedIn, but that, or you can email me info@dscottedits.com.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dee.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to work with me, but if people want to like have a conversation about living with chronic illness and figuring out how to do this editing business thing, or if you want to get connected to various communities, I'm really happy to do that. So,
Oh,
and thank you,
well,
Paulina, for creating this space and the conversations and space to like be able to get into the things that are somewhat unique when it comes to those of us with body minds that, yeah, are not limitless. So.
yep. Thanks for being here. If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.